Good evening, Chatsworth Park families. We will get started in about 1 or 2 minutes. Good evening, Chatsworth Park families again. It's 5 o'clock. Let's give it 1 more minute and then we will get started at 5:01. All right, Chatsworth Park community, it is 5:01 right on the dot, and we're going to get started. First, I want to thank you so much for joining us for the stages of writing, kinder, first, second, and third grade, and how to help my child at home. It's so important in our primary years to make sure that our children are off to a great start as far as their writing. I mean, we know it's a skill that's going to carry us the rest of our lives. So I want to thank you so much for coming in and joining us tonight. Before we get started, at the bottom of your screen, you're going to see something that looks like a globe. If you can choose English or Spanish, because we do have translation available. And I'm going to ask our translators and our interpreters to please translate that for us, and then we'll continue our introductions.
I can. Oops. Okay. So, good evening, parents. Please choose a language by clicking on the world icon at the bottom of your screen. Unfortunately, Chromebooks do not offer this feature. Please use your phone or another device instead. Thank you. Buenas noches. Si desean escuchar esta conversación en español, por favor busquen la opción de idiomas haciendo clic en el símbolo de mundo en la parte baja de su pantalla. Los Chromebooks no ofrecen esta opción. Por favor, usen su teléfono u otro dispositivo. Gracias. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you to our translations unit for joining us tonight. It is so appreciated. Now I'd like to introduce two very special people. First, I'd like to introduce Mrs. Farkas. Mrs. Farkas is our Parent Center Director. Good evening, Mrs. Farkas.
Good evening, Mrs. Ratner. Welcome to all the parents. Hoping to gain some valuable knowledge from Mrs. Berry this evening and to be here to assist parents as well throughout the webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Farkas. Mrs. Farkas will be monitoring the chat. Well, let me unmute myself. There we go. As we go along throughout the presentation, Mrs. Farkas will be monitoring the chat, and they will have a live Q&A session at the end. So as you're thinking about it and you're learning from Mrs. Berry, and you go, oh, wait, I want to type that question, please feel free to use the chat, and we will definitely get to your questions at the end. And now, without further ado, I'd like to welcome our amazing Mrs. Berry, who is here to share with you her wealth of information. And we thank Mrs. Berry for hosting this seminar.
Awesome. Thank you, Mrs. Ratner. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to present this information to you guys. And I'm also doing, just a heads up, I'm doing a kindergarten through 5th grade stages of reading development next Monday at 5 p.m. as well, and how to help at home. So if you found this intriguing and you learned something, please come back next week at 5 p.m. also. This is being recorded, so one of my disclaimers is I talk really fast. So it is being recorded in case you need to come back and get it, and I will be sending that link as a YouTube video to Mrs. Ratner in about a day or so after it uploads. So here we go, stages of writing and how to help your kids at home. I'm going to start with a little bit about me. Some of you don't know who I am. I am Mrs. Berry. I'm previously known as Miss Hobbs. I just got married this summer to my lovely husband, Mr. Berry. I'm 27 and I'm currently a kindergarten teacher here at Chatsworth Park. And I have an obsession of all things Disney. It comes across often. My education, I received a Bachelor of Science in Early Childhood Education in 2016 from the College of Charleston in Charleston, South Carolina. Yes, I am a transplant from the state of South Carolina. When I was in school there, we had to specialize in specific grade spans for our certification, and I specialized in early childhood for my degree and my certification, which was grades pre-K through 3rd. So now I have 2 certifications. I have the California Teaching Credential, which is pre-K through 12, as well as in South Carolina, it's pre-K through 3rd. My experience, just so you know a little bit about my background, a little more about why I'm somewhat qualified, I think, a little bit more than somewhat qualified to talk about this information with you guys. This is currently my 5th year teaching, but we did learn about this for also 4 years in college with practice within school, so about total in 9 years of practice. I've taught in a variety of school areas from rural South Carolina. When I first moved here, I taught in downtown Los Angeles. That was a 2-hour drive from the valley. That was fun. And now here in beautiful Chatsworth. This is my 2nd year at Chatsworth Park, and I've taught personally all grades pre-K through 2nd already. So let's get started with the presentation. As you can see, a little bit of Disney there. Disclaimer, we will not be focusing on what any particular stage is equivalent to grade level. All children learn at different speeds, just like learning to walk. However, we will be focusing on understanding the different stages of learning to write and how you can help determine their level at home and help proceed to help make them the best writer they can be. We're aiming for growth and progress. Here's disclaimer part 2. Like I said, sorry in advance, I do talk a little bit fast, but it is being recorded in case you miss anything or want to go back and revisit. And if you're here, I think you guys believe in this as well, especially with virtual school. It takes 3, or known as a village. Educating our children is not just on the teacher, it's also now especially partially on the parent and partially on the kid as well. So it takes all 3 parts working together to achieve the most amount of growth that we can see. So thank you for joining me. If you're here, then that means you definitely probably believe in this as well. So awesome. We are ready to start. So just like when we clapped when they took their first steps and fell, we celebrate when they try to write in each stage. They didn't run when they were born, so they're not going to write like an adult when they're 5. Here is the overview of what I'm going to talk about. There are about 12 stages of writing, and the ones on the bottom right kind of flow into the 9 through 12 at the bottom. So we're going to start with pictures, and we're going to end all the way at transitional writing. So we are going to talk about each of these stages. So first we have the picture stage. Kind of speaks for itself. Here we go. How to help in the picture stage. So how you would know, before I do that, how would you know what your child's writing is? How can you determine what stage they're in? Let them pick a topic, anything they want to write about. Give them 5 to 10 minutes to just sit there and write, and then read it. Let them do it all by themselves, and whatever they show you and are able to read back to you, you'll be able to determine what their writing stage is just from looking at their writing they do all by themselves within 5 to 10 minutes. So let them do that, and then you can compare off of that based off of how to help from here, which is where we go. So that's determining it. Just let them write something real quick. So if they bring you back just a picture, no words. How do I help with just the picture stage? Well, if their pictures are difficult for you to understand, you can help them think about shapes and parts of objects. For example, imagine your child wants to talk about and write about, they went horseback riding. Talk about how the horse looked. What parts did it have? It had a body, great. What shape might you draw? What parts were attached to the body? What shape could you make for the head? How many legs? Was the tail long? Did it go past down the legs? What else was there beside the horse? So adding the background to the picture, like the grass or the barn and the sky, the context will help people understand the picture better. And the green grass will certainly give more information. Pictures are writing too. I encourage the students in all of my classes, you write first and draw second, because drawing always seems like the more fun opportunity, but it really helps talk about what they're writing. Think about the books that they're reading when they're, pre-K through third, towards the end, you don't see as many pictures. When you're reading those books, you're looking at pictures to help understand the story. So it will help you understand their writing if they're drawing pictures with all of their words. So after picture, we kind of get this hodgepodge of random scribbling all the way to environmental print. So we have random scribbling, which is just all over the place. Scribble writing is scribbles but linear. Then you start to get symbols that look like letters. Then you'll just have random letters. They started to realize what letters are. And then just like random scribbling goes to scribble writing, random letters will go to letter strings. They'll just write a bunch of letters in a straight line. Then they go to letter groups with spaces. And then environmental print is mostly copying. But I'm going to go into a little bit more detail about each of those. So drawing and imitative writing is a child writes a message, which imitates grown-up writing. It shows that they're attempting to communicate. They've seen adults write, they're trying to write. Copying words, a child copies words from handy resources like books, posters, word walls. The writing makes sense and shows knowledge of letter formation. So like you can see in that picture, mouse, cat, dog. It was copied off of somewhere. That's why it's spelled correctly. And then drawing in strings of letters. So they're writing, a string of letters. It kind of conveys a message. The letters are formed well, but they don't have any relationship to the sound that the letters make. But they're aware that what they're writing and drawing conveys meaning, and they might be able to read it back to you. So how to help in the scribbling through environmental print stage. That's kind of all grouped together. It's very similar, and a lot of that moves very quickly. Just talk about their writing with them. Have them read to you what they wrote. Have them point out what letters or words they used. Help them practice writing from left to right, top to bottom, and adding spaces. If they're getting in that style of print, like, how we print and write across a page, then you're going to go from letter strings to groups of letters because you're adding in spaces. You're going to go from random scribbling to the lines because you're going to be practicing going from left to right. And if they're reading to you what they wrote, then they're going to start to realize, wait, I know something, wait, I missed something, and they're going to be able to go back and start self-actualizing and self-correcting some of the stuff that they wanted to write, because if they know the word mom, that's a word that they would write all the time. You know, that's a sight word for them. They're going to go back and realize that they just wrote, you know, one of the letters, but if they read it back, they might add in the other ones too. So talk to them about what they wrote, practice going left to right, top to bottom, and adding spaces. And then here's the meat of it, the inventive spelling stages. So we're going to talk about from beginning sounds all the way through transitional writing. So what is the beginning sound stage? It's basically early phonetic writing. So they're writing words using mostly consonants to represent words and sounds. It shows individuality, it's focused on a topic, and it makes sense. So I'm not going to write, cat dog is funny cool. I'm not just going to write a bunch of random words. That wouldn't put me in the beginning sound stage because it doesn't make sense and it's not focused on one topic. But if I wrote, I like cats, and I write I-L-C, that's the first sound in each of those words. I like cats. If they wrote those 3 letters with a space in between it, that's the beginning sound stage because you've already practiced putting the spaces in between the words in the stage before. Just like this picture shows, I love you, it has those beginning individual sounds of the words that you hear. So how can you help in the beginning sound stage? Start by encouraging them to label the pictures that they're drawing with their writing. So think about that horse picture again. Does your child know what letter makes the sound that starts with horse? They can put an H next to the horse in that picture, or just on the lines, just an H. Do they know what letter makes the sound that starts with grass? Then they would write the G either next to the grass or on a separate line on the page. Do they hear any other sounds if you say the word slowly together? So if I'm helping a child that's in this stage, like I might say the word horse really slow. Horse. And they would tell me what they heard. If they hear just S, great. I'm like, what did you hear? And they say, I'm like, well, what letter do you think that is? If they say C, great. We might not have learned the letter S yet. If that's what they hear, that's what they hear. If they say S, great. Let's write an S. So that's it for now. It's mostly just the beginning sound of each word you want to say or of the picture that you're labeling. So why shouldn't I spell words for my child to write? This is a big part of this presentation. This has to do with the inventive spelling stage. They're using words and letters to represent sounds that they hear in the words, and they make sense, and they are used for writing a little bit longer text, more than just one sentence. It might be 1 or 2 sentences where we start to see inventive spelling stage start to get in. Inventive spelling can also be called invented spelling. It's basically taking a word you don't know and taking your best guess based off of phonetic knowledge. So this could be the sounds letters make, or depending on where you are grade level wise, it could be sound chunks you know, like digraphs and blends, like ch and w and like ph sometimes makes that sound, or even vowel, like tricky vowel combinations, like AR says R, like a pirate type of thing. So taking phonetic knowledge, whether it's just letters or sound chunks and blends, to help make an educated guess with their writing. It means they're spelling words based off of sounds they know at that current time. So in my class currently, I think we've learned 7 or 8 letters so far because it's virtual learning. I only expect my students to get sounds and words correctly at beginning sounds if they're at the beginning sound stage, as well as if it's a letter I've taught. If I haven't taught that letter, I don't expect them to know that sound at the beginning of a word or in a word if they're past that stage. So why do we have inventive spelling? because in the English language, letters don't have one specific sound like they do in many other languages. There's lots of rules to learn, and some we never learn, and some we use but we don't know about. Should your child wait until they know all these rules or memorize them? Probably not. That's going to take a really long time. So we have inventive spelling. Here's an example. If your kid doesn't know how to spell ice cream, I-C-E-C-R-E-A-M, as I-S-C-M or I-S-K-M, how can they tell about the story when they went to an ice cream truck? So like if I were to use inventive spelling, so that means I'm adding more than just the beginning sound of the word. The beginning sound for ice cream would just be I and K or I and C. But as I move to inventive spelling, I have more consonants in the word. I don't always hear vowels. Vowels tend to come at the end of the inventive spelling stage because we don't always hear the vowels in the words. So ice cream, usually first and last sound. Sometimes there's a middle sound that we'll also hear in inventive spelling. So if they know they can't spell ice cream, they probably aren't going to write about it. They'll just write love, mom, over and over again. They'll draw rainbows and horses, things that they're familiar with, which is the environmental print stage. Copying words that they know, writing familiar print, drawing pictures they've drawn a million times, because they're not going to venture out if they feel like they don't know how to do it. But inventive spelling is how to take them out of what I don't know into what I can do with just that little bit of, well, what, you know something. That's going to help you write even when they think they can't. So here's a promise, and I know other teachers feel this way. If you let them go through the process of inventive spelling, they won't spell ice cream as I-S-C-M in high school. They're going to learn more rules of English, such as like silent E, and they will see words often enough for them to become sight words, and they'll just know it. The more they write, the more they read, the more they know, and it'll just come second nature to them. They will learn. It takes a lot of just reading and writing to get there. But there must be words they should spell correctly. Yes, these are called sight words. Reading and writing fluency are built when kids have a lot of sight words at their fingertips. So what are sight words? So granted, we're still talking about that inventive spelling stage. Yes, we want them to spell as many words as they don't know inventively, but there are words that they should be able to spell. Sight words, or rainbow words, or also known as spelling or vocabulary words. Sight words are words your kid can recognize and read without sounding it out. Some words might be sight words because they can't be sounded out by a kindergartner with just the letter sound knowledge, like the word the, because they wouldn't learn the TH, and E doesn't say U does. So some words become sight words because they're important to your kid and they write them often, like their name, mom, dad, love. So words they use and see often become sight words, as well as words they're practicing from class. We teach sight words and vocabulary words in all of our classes, and as words are added, they become words that you encourage them to spell correctly whenever possible, but not by spelling it for them. Remind them this is a sight word or a word wall word, and have it available for them to find or to look at. Have a place where you post, past words that you've learned or have an easy access. In my class, we're doing rainbow words, and so we just learned a set of 10, red words, the beginning of the rainbow. And when I write with my kids, I have them, I think we wrote about our favorite food last week. They had to write I, like, and our favorite food. Well, I and like are two of our sight words. I'm not going to spell I and like. I've already taught them. We've already learned it. If they wanted to know it, they had to grab their red words and they can find it on their sheet and then they can copy it. Some kids already know it because they've been using it. Some kids need the paper or need the words posted up for them to find it. this is how they help. And you talk to them, wait, isn't that a sight word? If their kid is asking you, how do I spell the? How do I spell can? Wait, is that one of our sight words? And then they can go check. And that way you're also practicing reading in turn with the writing and building that fluency. And the more you do it, the less you'll have to go back and look at the paper, because they'll start writing it more and more often. So they won't have to look at it every single time. The more they write it, the more they'll know it. So how can you help specifically with inventive spelling? Basically by stretching the word out and saying it slowly. Your child should listen for as many sounds as they can. So this inventive spelling stage kind of goes from beginning sound to a little bit more complex. So they'll likely start with a beginning sound. If I say horse, what sound do you hear first? We want to get the first sound in at the beginning. Then they're most likely to add the ending sound of a word. Then they'll start to add middle sounds. As you progress through the year with words that fit your grade level, you will start to see like vowel sounds come in. So H-O-R-S for horse. Now, O-R is not a sound that I'm going to be teaching my kids, so they might have to look at the shape my mouth makes if they wanted to do that. But vowel sounds in words usually come later, in the later half of the year, when you're talking about inventive spelling, no matter what grade level they're in. Any word that they're spelling invented, the vowel sounds come later. They're usually going to get consonants first, middle, last in the word. Same goes with syllable words. Like if I'm breaking up a word like hot dog, I'm not sure, I think that's one word. So hot dog, I would take that first chunk, hot, and I would stretch it out. Hot, and I would listen to the sounds, hot, and I'd write that. And then I go back and I'd do the next syllable, hot dog, dog, and then I would try and write dog and put it together. So it may help to break up those words into syllables. If you find that your kid, they're reading words with multiple syllables in them, then they should be writing words with multiple syllables in them. So it helps to break it up. And then that way they can take that one piece and sound that out, and they'll get more of those middle sounds in there during that. Like adding E's at the end of words don't come until they know about silent E, or they've read about horses and it's a sight word from a book that they've read. Like maybe they've read 10 books about horses this week. When they go to write it, they're gonna look at it and be like, wait, that's not how you spell horse. That's not what it looked like in the book. And they're able to fix it themselves. Sound it out. Many families tell kids to sound it out when learning to read, but it's a really big skill when learning to write, stretching out the sounds. And another presentation, spoiler alert, sounding it out is at the end of my reading strategies list for next week. But am I backtracking? If you've been spelling entire sentences for your kid for a while, it may be strange to backtrack to beginning sounds and one-word labels. But it's important that they go through this stage so they can write on their own. The goal is for your child to write independently. So let them start now. If your kid knows any sounds of letters, they can write independently. And then last, we have the transitional writing stage, which is conventional writing with some phonetic writing. They focus on a topic. Most of their writing is close to correct copy of words, and their writing demonstrates a voice, like using words like once upon a time, happily ever after. They're starting to find a voice within their writing, and it's not just a retell of words. There's more to it when they're writing, and it focuses on a topic. Most words are spelled correctly by this point because they've read a bunch of words and they've written a bunch of words, so a lot of it comes second nature. They've learned lots of different sounds and blends and chunks, and they're able to piece it together. So how to help in the transitional writing stage? During this stage, they will spell most words correctly on their own. They'll rely on the phonics knowledge to spell longer words, which is where you're breaking up the word and then finding chunks. Like if I wanted to spell like a chocolate chip, let's do chocolate. That's a nice big word. So I do chocolate. So let's take the first sound, chalk. What do I hear? Chalk. I know CH says ch, O says ah, and either C or K says k. If it's in the middle of a word, it's most likely C. Those are things that I've learned by writing and learning phonetic sounds. And then I take each chunk and then I do the same for k in the middle of the word and lut. And then I would read it back to myself. Does it look right? And then I'm able to continue writing. So that's using a reliance of their phonics knowledge to spell longer words. Here's where punctuation marks seem to be mostly correct, and it's not just periods. There are exclamation points and question marks used, and capital and lowercase letters are incorrect places. In the beginning stages, we don't focus as much on capital and lowercase. They do know, capital starts a sentence, capital starts a name. As they start to learn those grammar rules, we're going to talk about grammar in a second, they'll start to realize that. But by the time they get to transitional writing, capital and lowercase letters are second nature to them. The handwriting is pretty seamless. They start to write for different purposes, like storybook language, once upon a time, happily ever after, become part of their writing samples. As they progress through the stages, various pieces become automatic and fluent. Handwriting becomes easier, and so does spelling of words. So you might have a kid that knows how to write, their handwriting is impeccable, but you still might be working on first sounds. That's okay. Focus more on the sounds of the words and what type of letters and what sounds you see inside their words to help determine what stage they're at. But by the time they get to transitional, most of these things will have worked themselves out. Grammar. So as mentioned in the transitional stage, your child's grammar will develop with the more that they read and write. As they start reading back what they wrote out loud, they'll start to notice things don't sound right or look right, and they will start to fix grammar mistakes. Like we would play a game in some of my classes before where I would read a sentence and they'd have to tell me what didn't sound right, and they'd have to help me fix it. Like they like the to hat. Well, we have to fix it to hats because to hat didn't make sense. And when I read it, now I can figure out how to fix hat to hats. I would be adding that sound at the end. That's where the grammar starts to come in, where they adding the endings to the words to help with the grammar. Each grade level has different sets of grammar skills that teachers teach throughout the school year in various ways. So ask your teacher specifically what grammar skills you're working on, and then just have your kid read out loud what they wrote and see if it sounds right, and they'll start to catch their own grammatical mistakes as well, thinking about where they're pausing, how are they reading it, does it sound correct. Handwriting, similar to what was mentioned in the transitional writing stage, it becomes easier to do. I'm not sure why the letter B is there. I think it's for the child and easier to read by everyone else, but it's through practice. The more they read and write, the better their reading and writing will be, and this includes handwriting. If they're reading what they wrote back to you, they might notice that they wrote the wrong letter. So kids are more inclined to read dog correctly if they see it written. But if they wrote B-O-G, D and B are very easily flipped, as you can see in my presentation. And if they're looking at it like bog, I didn't want to write bog, I want to write dog, they'll start to fix it. Same with uppercase letters. Sometimes writing like a large letter that fits way too big in the line, it's not the same size. If they can't read what they wrote to you, start to have them write smaller. If their handwriting is still like the scribbling stage, like way back in the beginning, I've taken before and they would tell me what they wanted to write so that they could get from scribbling to at least environmental print, which is copying. and write what they wanted to in a yellow marker, and then they had to trace on top of it until they could at least do environmental print. Once they pass that, they shouldn't really be copying anything, but you can help them fix some of their handwriting along the way, so it's easier for them to read it back to you. Handwriting and backwards letters usually work themselves out by the end of 3rd grade. If they're still having issues with these, just speak to your child's teacher about additional strategies that they might have for you. We're almost to the end, don't worry. Help us help your child. If you do the spelling for them, you're doing any of their work for them. We don't know what their strengths and weaknesses are. And then we can't teach to their strengths and weaknesses. So if you're doing something for them, it appears that they can do it. And then the teacher doesn't teach them how to do that thing. So if all the kids in my class are, in kindergarten and they're writing 3 sentences, well, I guess I don't need to teach writing because they seem to know how to do it. This is really important for virtual learning because they're not in front of us to write in front of us to see what they can do. So it's a lot of trust that we're just laying our hearts out for you guys, So let us help your kids by letting them do a lot of this stuff independently. And you're kind of sitting there and guiding and asking questions and maybe stretching out words, or what do you think that sounds like? Or does that sound right to you? What could you do to fix that? And asking those type of questions based on the stage, what could they be doing to help improve their writing a little bit more? But what if no one can read what they wrote? Maybe we can, maybe we can't. This is why drawings are helpful. So don't discredit the importance of drawing when your kid is writing. Think about all the picture books. And as magical as the deciphering skills of a teacher may be, if you know what your kid is trying to write, I always have my students turn in their writing with a caption so they read to me what they wrote. So that way I can see, oh, what stage of writing are they at? What are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? If that's not working, have them, leave some quotes at the bottom. If you're not there when they wrote it, ask them what they wrote. Let them read it to you. It's important that they become able to read back what they wrote. They might not be able to do it at first, especially if they wrote it a few hours ago, but this will help work on reading back what they wrote. But most importantly, read what they wrote. I can't mention this enough. It's basically like writing something without reading is like baking cookies without eating them. If you're gonna bake cookies and not eat them, don't bake cookies. Invite me over and I'll eat them for you. But yeah, so writing without reading it to someone is, what was the point in writing it? The purpose of writing is for someone to read it, is to tell people how you feel and to talk about explaining what you're thinking in a tactile format. So we want to make sure that we can read back what we wrote. I have a couple more steps. Hold on, Ms. Farkas. This goes for everything. How can you help on every assignment at every stage? Set them up for success with tools they need. Help them organize and plan. Help them read and understand directions and encourage them to do their best. As well as making them feel like a writer. It's important to honor their writing efforts, especially of our younger children. Find opportunities to have your child share their work with others. Display their efforts on the fridge. Have them read what they wrote at the dinner table, or make a special little author's, chair and have them read what they wrote to you. And it'll empower them to keep writing, and it won't make writing seem like, ugh. It'll be fun and exciting, and they'll want to do it more. I'm just going to preview a couple additional resources. These will be available. Like I said, this is recorded, so I will make sure to attach these as well. It's just some websites, and then we'll go into a couple questions. Author to Author is a good website. It has video clips about talking about different parts of the writing process to help specifically parents at home. Reading Rockets also helps with the reading aspect of the writing, and it talks a lot about how those tie together. How to support spelling at home. If there's lots of out there about, you know, the inventive spelling and spell at home, there's a couple, just, you know, YouTube search it. Writing posture, helping them plan. This is one of the things you can do. You know, pencil grip, sitting up straight, putting the paper in front of them. How to hold a pencil. I'm not going to play this for you, but pencil grip is another thing that helps with handwriting as well. Academic coach was more of something I talked about with the parents specifically in my class, but I wanted to include it. Mostly just to remember the importance of productive struggle, which was something I included on here. Yeah, they're probably going to complain a little bit when you start having them write all by themselves. But if you tell them, you try it, and then I'll help you after. Let them see what they can do, then go to them and kind of help them through it by having them read to you, having a discussion about their writing. They're not going to get it all 100% correct all the time. That's productive struggle. But they will get it right by the end. Okay. Sorry, I tried to fit it in all very quickly. If we have any questions from Ms. Farkas, if you heard any or saw any.
We do have a question from Ms. Zagara about using the hangman game for spelling when your child thinks that they know how to spell it correctly. Do you suggest that?
Yeah, I think any type of spelling game is totally fine. I have a lot of games that I play with sight words. I think sight words would be a really good use of playing the hangman game for. You know, how many letters. At the beginning stages of writing for kids who are working on beginning sounds and like doing the environmental print, we, in class, I would take and I would write the number of lines of how many words they wanted to say. So definitely taking hangman for spelling is a totally fun way to review, I would think, spelling and vocabulary words for sure. I think that'd totally be fine.
I don't have any other questions, although Sophia the First asked, are we going to write? So I'm not sure if she can elaborate on that question or not. But
I think if you'd like to write something that you'd learned, you can always write something at home if your kids are, you know, with you and watching as well. But yeah, they could write something that you see. You can write all the time. Take a piece of paper and a pencil with you. Same, I advise this with reading as well. Take a pencil and a piece of paper with you, and even if you're at the beginning stage, something you see in the car, you can play I Spy, like the word blank, and that's more about reading, but then have them write it after they say it, even sitting in the car. If you have a piece of paper and a pencil, you can be writing at any time. Even watching TV, you can make games out of that too. You can watch Wheel of Fortune. I know my dad loves to tell the story. My cousin Billy learned the alphabet by watching Wheel of Fortune. So, you know, turn subtitles on, reading, there you go, you're reading or watching TV as well. And you can always have them write something they hear or they see after they watch something too.
that's a great suggestion. Thank you.
Anything else?
There are no other questions in the Q&A. If any other parents have questions at this time, you can feel free to type them into the chat or the Q&A, and we will answer them for you.
Yeah. Here, I will jump back, let's see, to the page that has all the different stages. I think it's this one. There you go. In case you have any specific questions, this is just an overview of, just a review what we talked about. There's lots of different stages. How are you going to figure it out? Let your kid write anything that they want to write about. Give them at least a minimum of 5 minutes. Make them write the whole time for at least 5 minutes, up to 10 minutes. Look at it and compare. And most importantly, guide them along. Don't spell for them. Practice doing sound chunks. What do they hear? What do they see? Taking sight words, and using them to help them spell. And as you jump into the transitional writing and spelling, you are working on a lot more of the grammar starts to come across, and a lot more of writing voice is what you start to see, because you've mastered a lot of the phonetic spelling parts of the earlier stages and through the inventive spelling, and you want to get more of how people talk into how they're writing as well. Okay.
All right.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for joining me. Like I said, next week I'm doing stages of reading as well. That one has a little bit more meat into it because it goes kindergarten through 5th grade as well. It's at 5 o'clock next week if you'd like to come back, because reading and writing go hand in hand like peanut butter and jelly. And if you're allergic to peanut butter, it's like marshmallow fluff and jelly on a sandwich, if that's what you eat. But yeah. Okay, if we don't have any other questions, then that's it.
Thanks so much, Mrs. Berry.
Yes, thank you guys for coming. Thank you all.
Have a wonderful evening.
You too. Good night, everyone.
Good night.